Is it difficult to get an STD? I wouldn't think so with all the statistics we've looked at and the people. Come on. 50% of everyone who ever has sex outside of marriage will get an STD. That's minimum. That's minimum. Sounds pretty easy to me. I think you need to look at every single partner. Realistically, no matter who they are, being STD infected. If you don't do that, you're not a very intelligent person. You know what the government tells you, Planned Parenthood and others? This is amazing. They started this with HIV. I remember a senator promoted this. He said, look, you need to train young people to ask questions. Ask the other person if they're infected. I thought, come on. No guy's going to tell you. Young ladies, you girls remember something. An aroused hormone has no conscience. You understand that, Michelle? You understand that? You got that? An aroused hormone has no conscience or morality or theology. So dumb. 90% of men will lie right through their teeth to you. Especially if they get that point they're aroused, you say, well, just a minute. Are you infected? Oh, no. Most women would rather die than tell somebody that. But that's what they say. Ask someone. That's your protection. Whew. That's putting your whole life in the hands of someone else. At University of California, Los Angeles, several years ago, the director of the Student Medical Center said, in one act of sex, many students are getting 5 different sexually transmitted diseases. In one act of sex. In a period of 1 week, I had a woman from Atlanta, Georgia, and a man from Cleveland, Ohio come to me in 1 week. Because for years, I've talked on maximum sex. High schools, universities in 118 countries. And so everybody knows me for that. And this woman came to me, she said, I run a suburban clinic for pregnant women, especially young pregnant women. And when they come in, I forget the percent, it was a high percentage. When they test them, they find an STD. But this is what she told me. She said, if they give us enough time and we spend enough money, we can almost always find at least 3 more STDs. I fly to University of Ohio State University. A doctor comes up to me the night after I spoke on sex, introduced himself, said the exact same thing. He said, if we have enough money and enough time, because you can't run one test. You got to run a whole battery of tests. They say, we usually find at least 3, if not 4 more other sexually transmitted diseases if we find one. No wonder God in love said, wait. Wait. Not because I want to take the fun out of your life. Wait, because I love you, I want to protect you, and I want to provide for you. To have a maximum love, sex, and marriage relationship with your spouse with no fear. I've been married for 39 years to the same woman I married to just about the greatest woman God ever created. I stand in awe of my wife. I'm serious. And I thank God her 4 children have raised up and they call her blessed. And they call her, their mother, their shining star. And for 39 years, once live on television, my wife about died, said, what's your hobby? And without thinking, I said, sex. Well, no, I'm in it. I mean, for 39 years. And man, the poor lady interviewing me didn't know what to do, but at least I was honest. I said, my hobby is sex. And I love it. But just to think, 39 years. I've never had 1 ounce of fear or my wife in any way for any disease or anything from history past 10, 12, 40, 15, 20 years ago. Folks, that's called maximum sex. Never have to worry about antibiotics or condoms or salve or anything. Nothing. That is called sexual freedom. Do you get it? But let me tell you, it doesn't cost you to wait. It usually costs you when you don't wait. Say, well, it just happened. Oh, come on, get real. Sex doesn't just happen. That's the stupidest, most idiotic thing ever heard. Sex is a result of a choice, unless it's date rape. And boy, there's a lot of that. About 30% of all women are date raped. Sex just doesn't happen. It's a choice. So don't ever forget that either. Amy Grant. Some of you probably don't remember Amy Grant. When I was a little older than you, she was big out there, a big name. She's still around, excellent. But she did a song, one of the best songs ever. The theme of Amy Grant's song was this: let your mind guard your heart. Ooh, most people are driven by their heart. They make choices based upon their heart. No. Let your mind guard your heart. And I don't think you will ever reject it. Can STDs be seriously linked to illnesses like cancer? Yes, in a big way. UCLA Medical Center, which is one of the top medical centers in the world that deals with STDs and everything, they made this observation. In cervical cancer, which young ladies, all of you around the world, listen, it's not epidemic. And every one of you young ladies, your mom should have talked to you about it. What is happening among young women with cervical cancer. And what they found at UCLA Medical School, in all cases of cervical cancer, up to 99% of all of them, they find the presence of HPV, the sexually transmitted virus. It caused the Centers for Disease Control to make a statement several years ago. Centers for Disease Control, again, is the organization in Atlanta, Georgia, that helps nations all over the world with contagious viruses and diseases. They made this statement that sex is a cancer-producing activity. HPV and cervical cancer. 30% of cervical cancer is not stopped by the vaccine for HPV. There's 100 strains, as we looked, of HPV. 40 causes genital infection, STDs. 14 are high risk for cervical cancer. And the vaccine only deals with several of them. And there's none for men. Now think of this. An individual who has an HPV infection is 3,200 times more likely to develop throat cancer. Say 32 or 3,200 times more likely. And everybody thinks they'll beat the odds.
Even when Hollywood does, even when one of the stars ends up, there's a couple of them that have had HPV and cervical cancer, and they'll talk about having cervical cancer. I think Brooke Shields came out and talked all about her cervical cancer, but she didn't explain that cervical cancer that she had was a result of a sexually transmitted disease, which was a result of choices she made going into it. And so there's no connecting of the dots to the infertility or the cervical cancer or the STD infection. And so when you're seeing people do the behavior day after day without ever paying a price, you begin to believe that you're invincible and that won't happen to you. And students already have that problem just because of their age.
Which are the greatest risks for cervical cancer? Two choices: early sexual activity or multiple sexual partners. What do you think? Early. Early? What do you think? Early. Yes and no. Both are true. Almost equal. Becoming about 14, 15, 16, or having more than two partners are the highest risk for cervical cancer. Can you get an STD if you're on the pill? Well, of course you can. It has nothing to do with covering your private sexual areas or anything. Even a condom doesn't do that. You could take 10 pills and you would still get an STD. And just like the government says, condoms are not effective for 20 to 25 of them. Well, how can I avoid getting an STD? You know, even science says this. In a monogamous relationship, they only have sex with each other, you won't get an STD. It's when one of them, man or woman, is not monogamous. That's when it all breaks down. Now here is a question to ponder. Is there any relationship between premarital sex and mental health? I mean scientifically. Is there any relationship to becoming involved sexually before marriage or waiting until after marriage? Let me show you what the studies show. Now one of the best books, there's a book out there. This thing, it's written by 2 doctors called Hooked. And the subtitle is New Science Now Casual Sex is Affecting Our Children. And I believe a lot what I've shared is in this book. But this book here has, everything is documented scientifically. And I highly recommend it by Dr. Joe McElhaney and Frida McKissick Bush, both MDs. In fact, Dr. McElhaney is the founder and head of the Medical Institute for Sexual Health out of Austin, Texas. But I recommend that in a big way. Now let me show you what the studies show. When God said, I love you, wait. Why? Because I want to protect you and provide for you. Is this true in mental health? Sexually active teenagers, which can be one sex involvement, what you're called sexually active, are what percentage more likely to attempt suicide? 100%? 300%, 500%, or 700%? What do you think, Michelle?
I'm going to say 500%.
Close, 300%. Sexually active teenage boys. Now I'll tell you, very seldom does research surprise me. Because most research depicts life depicts the research. But look at this one. Sexually active teenage boys are what percentage more likely to attempt suicide? 100%, 300%, 500%, 700%. What do you think? 500. 700%. Over twice as likely as young ladies.
Actually, one of the greatest risk factors for STDs is multiple partners. One of the greatest risk factors for depression, loss of self-esteem, and a lot of emotional consequences has to do with the number of people that you have relations with. And we do know that the more people you have relations with, the more likely you are to have difficulty forming healthy relationships in the future when you're ready to be with one person.
The American College of Health Association in the spring of 2006 released a study. 43% of all university students in America felt so depressed it was hard to function. 61% in the past year felt there was times when everything was hopeless. I mean, these are young people with everything to live for, the future. And you know, as I trace it back with depression, I see 2 parallels from starting the 50s and the 60s with sexual involvement and depression, everything like that, going right up. I don't know if there's a causal factor. I'm not saying that. I'm not informed enough to say that. But it's very interesting to see the trends of the 2 together. And then to see what research shows if you are involved in premarital sex. And just remember this. There is no condom for your heart, and there is no condom for your mind. Let your heart be guarded by your mind. Young ladies, do you hear me? Guys, do you hear me? Let your heart be guarded by your mind.
Is it okay to have anal sex? Is another question. Well, the anus is an organ of excretion, not entrance. And anytime you put an erect penis or other object into the rectal area, it's possible to injure the opening to the rectum as well as the thin blood vessels that are lining the internal organ. When this occurs, there can be tears or fissures, and if there's an infection, easily enters into your body, such as HIV and AIDS. The lining is made thin on purpose so that it will absorb the water from the waste products and make it easier for elimination. It also helps to control gas and bowel movement. So, is anal sex okay? I'll let you decide.
I was in Ivory Coast, Africa, several months ago, and there were 1,800 students from 35 countries there. It was one of the greatest teaching times I ever had with about 18 to 25-year-old, mainly university students, young professionals. This young lady came up to me and she said, after the first day, they called me Papa Josh. And she said, Papa Josh, could I ask you a question you could only probably ask your father, but my father died of AIDS. So many of them there told me that. I don't know who my father is. My father left. My father died. And she got real close and she said, is oral sex really sex? I said, it seems to. Why do you think they call it sex? What is sex? Let me give you 4 situations that I would qualify as sex. Oral genital, manual genital, genital genital, and penetration.
Oral sex has become quite the rage recently. In fact, one study I saw in an international paper showed that between 12 and 17-year-olds, 54% had had or performed oral sex. So what's the big deal? I think part of the rage is the fact that people think they're not going to get pregnant, which is true, or they think they're still a virgin, or that they're not going to get a sexually transmitted disease. But people underestimate the power of this activity and how it affects you. When my wife and I first got married, my wife came home because she was in a group with some women and they would just talk every week about their lives. And the topic of sexuality came up. And she told me, she said, you wouldn't believe that these women who are now married, happily married, had been involved in oral sex before their marriage. And now some of them were actually in counseling because of it, because of the memory, because the images locked within their minds are profoundly affecting them now. In fact, studies actually show that when it comes to oral sex, that every single STD in some way or another has been passed through oral sex.
Hand to genital, oral to genital, genital to genital, and penetration. All 4 can lead to HPV infection, and condoms don't help. What, isn't oral sex safer? Well, I have to admit, it's probably a little hard to get pregnant. I don't think the sperm would travel that far. When it comes to pregnancy, yes, but to everything else, absolutely not. Most people don't want to know the truth. Say, Josh, you use a lot of stats. Yeah, I do. Because that's the only way you can really know what is true so often, what is reality. Just remember, all these diseases are passed through oral sex. In your mouth, in your anus, you still have columnar cells. Remember when I talked about that? Which act almost like factories to viruses. One study showed of all 15 to 19-year-olds in the United States, and boy, is the same thing true in Africa and everywhere, 50% of 15 and 19-year-olds have been involved in oral sex. And one study of a university at one time, one period, has showed 45% of students in just the last 30 days had been involved in oral sex. I even find that hard to believe, but other studies show that. In just 30 days.
And if sexual activity causes that, then the answer is to abstain from sexual activity. And it's not just intercourse. When I say sex, I'm talking oral sex. That has the same consequences. There's a lot of people that ask me, oral sex, that's kind of the, you kind of get out of all the consequences, right? If you just have oral sex versus intercourse. And the answer is no. Oral sex has a huge direct relationship with your, like I said, all the parts of who you are, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. It affects that because your body reacts the same way during oral sex as it does during intercourse.
Okay, having oral sex. You can't get pregnant, true. You can't get an STD, false. You can't get cancer, false. Well, having oral sex, you can't get an STD, false. If you have oral sex with 5 people, what is your chance of getting an STD? Oral sex with just 5 people. Now, if college students, 45% had had oral sex in the last 30 days, and probably 40% of them have had 10 partners. If you have oral sex with 5 people, what is your chance of an STD? 50%, 70%, 100%, or 250%? What do you say from Brazil? 50%. 250%. Condoms don't help. Chance of oral throat cancer if 6+ partners. 10%, 30%, 50%, or 900%? What do you say, Argentine? 900%. Yes. Just 6 partners in oral sex, 900% more likely to have throat cancer. What's the greatest factor for throat cancer? HPV infection, chewing tobacco, smoking, or alcohol? Haiti? Smoking? That's what most people think are chewing, HPV.
Can I do oral sex and still keep my virginity? Another way to ask that is, am I still a virgin if I only gave him head? Technically, physically, your vagina may not have been penetrated, but let's go back to the definition of sex. Any activity that is for arousal, stimulation, and gratification of sex.
Well, isn't it safe sex if we use condoms? You've all heard the term safe sex, haven't you? You probably haven't. You probably haven't. You know what you've heard? Now, your parents were raised on safe sex. Wear a condom, safe sex. They had safe sex week in universities, high schools, everything. Wear a condom, safe sex. And then they switched. Those who were propagating all that, overnight they changed. I bet none of you ever caught it. Most people don't, because most people think with their pelvis, not with their mind. They switched from wear a condom, safe sex to wear a condom, safer sex. You know why? They were afraid of being sued, and they were being sued. Because it's not scientific true. Wear a condom, safe sex. In fact, one of the top medical experts, Dr. Redfield, said, Josh, even scientifically it's not accurate. Wear a condom, safer sex. What you can state medically is wear a condom, less dangerous sex. But we'll beat the odds anyway. We're smarter than everyone else. I'll wear 2 condoms. The studies show that even their partners use condoms, women 100% of the time. A woman has sex with a guy who's been infected, one or number, condoms used 100% of the time, 37.8% of those women or young ladies will get infected. They call that safer sex? Well, that's better than 39%, I guess.
A piece of latex, a condom. And a condom, as long as you have a condom, you're safe. I mean, kids will say, well, I've never had unprotected sex. Well, what does that mean? What you need to understand is that condoms aren't safe. You can use a condom and still get STDs. Now, condoms provide some protection for HIV, one of probably the scariest STDs, because it does involve both males and females and they can both die. But the problem is there's over 30 STDs and condoms don't protect from all of them. And for some of them, like HPV, which is a very serious sexually transmitted disease for women, condoms don't protect at all, because herpes and HPV, both of these are skin contracted viruses. All it takes is skin contact anywhere in the genital area and you're infected for life. Males will carry HPV and herpes, not just on the penis, but on the scrotum. The condom doesn't cover that. And so when we've got 67% of sexually active teens infected with HPV and a condom does not protect, there is no way that you can say that having sex with a condom is protective. I mean, I could have sex 1,000,000 times with my husband who's only been with me, never use a condom, never get an STD. I could have sex once with some guy I meet at a hotel somewhere, use a condom and be infected for the rest of my life.
The National Institute of Health, for those that are not from the United States, from Egypt, wherever, the National Institute of Health is one of the top organizations in the United States on the health of individuals. And they said this, this is the #1 authority, said HPV transmission was not reduced by condoms. You never read that in the Trojan box. And this is what the NIH said. Now, boy. Non-penetrative sexual conduct, in other words, touching each other, rubbing each other, whatever, is a plausible route of transmission in virgins of HPV and many of the other viruses. Just touching. Why? Because it's passed by the moisture around the base of the penis and the vagina.
How can I get pregnant if he pulls out before he comes? The answer to the question, if you can get pregnant without penetration, has to do with the fact that with arousal and excitement, the guy has liquid that is released that's called pre-ejaculatory emission. It is teeming with sperm. And if it reaches the vagina where the woman's liquids are there, it allows them to swim inside and make contact with the egg before intercourse has ever occurred. That's one of the reasons why the first step of the 13 steps on how to put on a condom includes putting the condom on before any penetration occurs at the vagina.
Father came to me in Indiana. He said, I want to show you a picture of condom failure. He kind of chuckled. He showed me 3 beautiful daughters. He said each one of them was a condom baby. He said, am I glad? But each one of them, I was wearing a condom. That's called safer sex. Incredible.
I use a condom with every act of intercourse. Am I not safe? That's a good question. But let's answer the question of whether condoms are safe from the Center for Disease Control of the United States. The CDC says abstinence is the only surefire way to prevent sexually transmitted diseases. The second way is mutual monogamy with a known uninfected partner. And the third way is the use of a condom. So even if you use a condom consistently and correctly with each act of intercourse, you only reduce your risk for sexually transmitted diseases. The best reduction is with HIV, which is 85 to 87%. For gonorrhea and chlamydia, it's 50%. And for all other diseases, it is less than that.
What causes condoms to fail, to break down? Here's just several. Put in the back pocket where a lot of guys carry them. The moment you put it in the back pocket, because of the heat and the pressure, it starts to break down the latex. Put in a billfold. Same thing. Put into a billfold. The moment you put it in a billfold, it starts to break down. Kept in a glove compartment of a car or the center thing. Because of the heat that can develop there, it starts to break down. Kept in a refrigerator, starts to break down. Kept in a warm place, sunlight, starts to break down. Container on a ship, which they all come in, starts to break down. You better handle these very delicately. You better put them on a chain around your neck and never stand in the sunlight or get cold. I'm serious. They start to break down. Isn't sex a private act, though? Come on, between two individuals, and the government and the church has no right to regulate it. Look, it's my life. It's my body. It's my choice. No, it isn't. That's an absolute lie. Sex is not a private act like Planned Parenthood and everyone else would probably say it was. Sex is not a private act between two individuals. Look, these diseases pass from partner to partner to partner. A number of years ago, when Dr. C. Everett Koop was Surgeon General of the United States, for those of you in other cultures, it means he was a #1 health expert. He calls me on the phone. Interested, his secretary calls and said, on Tuesday at 2:13, Dr. Koop would like to talk to you. Not 2 o'clock, not 2, at 2:13 the phone rings. I guess that's how they do it in government. And he said, I had launched a big sexual purity program called Why Wait? He said, Josh, thank you for what you're doing. It's one of the most positive things out there. And then he said this, you've got to be more emphatic. I said, Dr. Koop, I get so much criticism now for being so straightforward. He said, I don't care. You've got to warn young people. Now this is #1 health. He said, every time they have sex, they're not just having sex with that person. They're having sex with everyone they had sex with, and they had sex with, and they had sex, and they had sex with, and they had sex their entire life. It's not a private act. You think on your wedding night, if either one of you have ever played around, you're not going to have a private act of sex between two people. Every person you ever had sex with and their partner will come right into that wedding bed. That's been proven now scientifically. Let me show you what I mean. Oh, this graphic is the most sad one. They caught an epidemic of gonorrhea in Atlanta, Georgia. They traced it back to a 16-year-old girl who had gonorrhea. She had sex with 2 guys. Out of that came, and you can see the grid here, the grid going out, 685 men and women got infected. From a private act between 2 individuals that the government, the church has nothing to say about it. At Colorado State, they came out, state of Colorado, came out with a pamphlet. And the title was, how many of the 64 people you had sex with last night did you know well? And it sent this, which you'll see right here, the thing down, where all these had sex, and from these 2 people went on and on and on, all the way down to scores of people. Some can be traced to 10,000 people. One act of sex. If it's a private act of sex between 2 individuals, then when you walk out from behind those closed doors, and why do they demand government money to fight STDs, for AIDS, for HIV, for HPV, for aid-to-dependent children? Why? Because it's not a private act between 2 individuals. They come out in the open, they demand this and this and this. The government needs to do this. Government needs to pay for this. The government needs to do research in HPV and HIV. Why isn't the government doing more? Why? It's a private act between 2 individuals that the government and the church has nothing to say about it. Oh, gosh. Each pregnant teenager in my country cost taxpayers a minimum $100,000. And there's 800 to a million every year that become pregnant. Wow. No wonder we can't balance a budget in this country. Oh. One lady came to me in San Diego. 8 years before, she'd had one affair in her marriage. And after that, everything in her marriage was okay, good, everything. She came to me broken. She had to go tell her husband she was HIV positive. And she well could have given it to her husband. A private act between two individuals? No. Anyone you ever have sex with, you're having sex with everyone they had sex with, and their partner for just about your entire life. And that's what Dr. C. Everett Koch called me about. If you become a teen father in the United States, I don't know what is true in other countries, but if you become a teen father, what can it cost you? $10,000 to $50,000, $50,000 to $250,000, or $250,000 to $350,000. An average $50,000 to $250,000. It's pretty expensive sex. When do you stop enjoying sex? There was a professor at, I believe it was Westmont College in California, Christian college. He was 84 years old and still teaching. They ought to be studying him. But he was 84 years old and still teaching. He taught sociology. And one day a young lady in his class raised a hand. I don't know what the subject was that day, but she raised her hand. She said, "Sir, when does one stop enjoying sex?" They said the 84-year-old professor pondered that. And then very slowly said, "I don't know, but it's sometime after 84. Yes! There's still a lot of time left. In Baltimore Sun newspaper a number of years ago, in the front, I think it was the front page, down the bottom left, there was just a little column of news story. It was a 102-year-old man married a 99-year-old woman. And the caption was, the next day they were both found dead in bed. And I read that and said, "Oh, Lord, if you take me loving. What a way to go." All I know is sure longer than I've been alive. And I've been around a long time. But that's the way God intended to be. Well, wait a minute. Then, if I really want that in marriage, isn't it better to live together first? Think with your mind, not with your pelvis, young people. Oh, there's a huge higher rate of divorce among people who cohabited and then got married. And a number of reasons. When you cohabit, you have a whole different level of commitment, totally different problems than you ever face level of commitment or anything in marriage. And you can't transfer from the cohabitation to marriage. You start all over again. And it's a far higher rate of divorce than for married couples. And you say, well, you got to do it to see if you can function. Look, the plumbing almost always works. Almost any penis will go in any vagina. That's not the problem. The problem is relationships. The problem is character, trust, respect. That's where the problems are, not in the plumbing. 25% of women get pregnant during cohabitation, no matter birth control pills, what? Children. And often it is devastating.
I often ask my students, high school seniors, 17 and 18 years old, is it okay to live with somebody before you get married? And it's amazing how many people think it's okay. Do you know that studies show between 40 and 60%, if you live with someone before you get married, you are between 40 and 60% more likely to get a divorce than if you don't live with that person. In other words, choosing to live with somebody will put you at a disadvantage in your future marriage. Now, why is that the case? Well, one reason is men and women often go into a living together relationship with different expectations. Men think it's a step to see if they want to commit. Women see it as a step closer to commitment. The other thing is people think when you live with somebody, you're getting kind of a foretaste of what marriage will be like, but the very things that make marriage work are absent when you're simply living with somebody. So one of my friends put it to me this way. He said, when you're living with someone, it's like you go in a room, you lock the door behind you, and you take the key and you kind of put it in your pocket. When you get married, you go in the room, you lock it, you take the key and you throw it out the window. You see, when you get married, there's a level of commitment. We say, I love you, and I'll stand with you, and I'm committed to you, period. And it's that level of commitment to one another that helps transcend difficult circumstances and make a marriage really work.
If you take a fish and you put it in a fishbowl with water, this fish will be fine. It'll be able to survive and live because it's in the confines of this fishbowl and water, and it has everything it needs. But what if this fish is like, hey, I want to be free. I want to be able to do whatever I want. I don't want this boundary of this bowl. I want to, live life to the fullest or whatever. So if you take a fish out of a fishbowl, you toss it out and let it be free and let it do whatever it wants, it's going to die, obviously, because it needs water and it needs the protection of the bowl to live. And that's how marriage is. And people often think, oh, it's a bad thing. Like, oh, how, it's taking away from my freedom to wait until marriage to have sex. And what it really is doing is it's providing life. It's providing safety and protection and full enjoyment when you're able to wait until you're married to have sex and have sex only within the confines of marriage. It's such a sense of protection.
On your wedding night, you have to take this by faith. On your wedding night, experience is the last thing you need. It's far better to get the experience together. It really is. I think anyone who has premarital sex is robbing their future spouse of a phenomenal area of growth together, of learning what arouses each other, everything, learning to be maximum when it comes to sex. And you can't transfer what you've done with somebody else to your marriage bed. You cannot. Here's the key. On your wedding night, be an amateur at sex and a professional at relationships. This is why a book was written once, Sex Begins in the Kitchen. Meaning, not that you lay on the floor and have sex, but it means relationships. A good meal, whatever. Be an amateur in sex and a pro in relationships. Yeah, but isn't premarital sex really great preparation for good sex in marriage? I feel like mentioning this man by name because he's so despicable. One time he was a very popular radio talk show host and TV. And he was talking about Whitney Houston, the singer. And she had just shared publicly in the interview that when she got married, she was a virgin. And this guy made jokes about that and laughed on national television here in the United States and says, nobody wants to marry a virgin. A man wants an experienced woman. I don't think, if that guy has a brain, it's lost. It's a little size of a pea, about maybe 10 ounces, not 3 pounds. I'll tell you this. There's hardly a man that truly in his heart of hearts and below his belt wants an experienced woman. Why do you think in prostitution all these men want what? A young virgin. Come on. They want an inexperienced woman. What a line. Why chance all the negative consequences, STDs, pregnancy, mental effects, bonding, the brain, everything? If you are promiscuous before you get married, you will be promiscuous after you're married. That's almost certain. You don't change. And you've already programmed your mind everything. Oh, here's a question. If you don't have sex before marriage, will your penis fall off? No. Will your breasts not grow? No. No one want to marry you? No. They will want to marry you. You can't have children? No sperm? No, you got more than you ever believe. Oh, folks. God says, I love you. Because I love you, I want to protect you and provide for you. So wait. Not because it's dirty, not because it's sinful, no. Because it's so beautiful. You say, well, sex is so beautiful, then it must be right. Look, y'all, your body doesn't know if it's married or not. Dopamine, the chemical we talked about, doesn't know if you're married or not. Oxytocin doesn't know if you're married or not. Vasopressin doesn't know if you're married or not. If sex wasn't beautiful before marriage, it wouldn't be beautiful after marriage. But here's the key. It is so beautiful before, it's worth protecting. Trust me, 39 years. It's worth protecting. Say, yeah, but you got married early. Yeah, 31 years of age. Man, I thought something was wrong with me. But let me tell you, I made up for it in the first week. Yeah, for 39 years. Yes, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful, it's worth waiting. I go into fraternity. Let me illustrate this. I was in Venice, California. That's kind of a tourist area of Los Angeles. And they have sidewalks out in the sand where you can roller skate. They have music going, and they have walls and murals on it and everything. And so we had 3 children in, and my oldest daughter must have been about 12 and my son 10. And we were roller skating. We went by this wall. Dottie took our little Katie to go somewhere because she was a little too young to roller skate. And went by this wall that had all this sexually graphics on it. F this, F that, the finger, everything else. Of course, my kids were, so I thought, what a great opportunity as a dad. So I said, let's go get a drink. So we went and got a soft drink, came back. Now here, right in front of this wall is a grown man with a 12-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, and they're roller skating right behind us, and you got to believe these people got to thought, this guy is a warped sex maniac. What is he, abusing these children or what? But I wanted my children to learn something. So I went right down. I said, kids, do you know what this means? I explained it to them, 10, 12 years old. Walk this, what that word means, what that picture means, what that giving the finger means, everything. And then I got through. I said, kids, and I said, do you know why this makes your father so disgusted and mad? Why, Dad? I said, I'll tell you why. Boy, this time they were listening to anything I had to say. I said, kids, you know, I lecture in universities all over there. I've lectured in over 1,200 universities. I've lectured in hundreds of fraternities, sororities all over the world, pensiones in Argentina, everywhere. Brasilia, I was there cordoned off in the campus for 3 days with the army surrounding it. I had 3 days to talk about Jesus in Brasilia to 3,000 students every day. And I said, I'll go into fraternity, and I'll be talking about sex and waiting. I said, kids, you know what these guys say to me? Oh, come on, McDowell. There's nothing wrong with premarital sex. It's beautiful. It's love. I said, kids, do you know I don't believe those guys? Why, Dad? For this reason. Those same guys will walk out of there when they want to degrade someone or something else. They use a 4-letter word with a sexual connotation or give them the finger. And I said, kids, if to them sex is truly something beautiful, it's love, then why do they use words with sexual connotations and physical gestures to degrade someone? I'll tell you why, son. Because they're not making love. They're effing someone. Do you get that, folks? I hear these people in movies and DVDs, television, kids in high schools, F this, F that. I never want my daughter to marry a guy like that. Because they'll never make love. They'll just be effed. That's all they'll be. They don't even know what love is. We lived in a little town of Julian, California. We went into the little cafe there, and this was about 2 months after that time on the beach where I explained that my son was 10. We're standing here, come these high school kids, and S this and F that, everything else. My son turned to me and said, Dad, that's not good, is it? I said, why? Because when they get married, their wife will only be effed. I said, wow, it's stuck. I think some people must have a very difficult time eating out of the same mouth they talk out of. And I would say, if I were your daughter's girl, don't ever marry a man like that. You'll never truly know what love is. You'll just be effed.